United States today. Changes in the nation. Today's main idea is that the United States has a strong economy and a powerful military, but is facing the challenge of world terrorism. A few things to keep in mind as we're going through today's lessons are: what was NAFTA? What is terrorism? And what terrorist group is responsible for the attacks against the United States on September 11, 2001? Changes in the nation. Because of its economic and military strength, the United States is often called the world's only superpower. In recent years, however, the United States has faced many challenges and changes. Economy, technology, an abundance of natural resources, and plentiful jobs have helped make the United States economy strong. The United States also benefits by cooperating with other countries. The three largest trading partners of the United States are Canada, China, and Mexico. In 1992, the United States, Mexico, and Canada signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. This agreement made trade easier and cheaper between the three neighboring nations. However, some people worry that agreements like NAFTA harm workers in the United States. They believe that manufacturing jobs will be lost because workers in other countries will work for lower wages. They are concerned that companies will move their factories to these countries to save money on labor. The United States economy has experienced significant ups and downs since the 1990s. In the 1990s, the nation experienced the longest period of economic growth in its history. By the end of 2007, the United States faced a recession, or a sharp decrease in economic activity. In this recession, the housing market collapsed, major banks and businesses failed, and an estimated 8.4 million jobs were lost in the United States. Since markets around the world are increasingly connected due to globalization, the recession affected economies around the world. The U.S. federal government responded to the economic crisis in several ways. The Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, lowered its interest rates. These rates determine the amount of interest that private banks pay to borrow money. When banks have to pay less, they lower their interest rates and charge their customers less. When people can borrow at lower rates, they spend more money. Increased spending can help improve the economy. Another way the federal government encouraged spending was by cutting taxes. With less money going to taxes, individuals would have more money to spend. The United States also implemented policies and laws increasing government spending on projects such as building roads and schools in order to create more jobs and put more money into the economy. Another step the United States government took was to help banks that were failing. After these policies were implemented, the U.S. economy began to recover. The recession officially ended in June of 2009. Today, most of the country is seeing reduced unemployment rates, though some companies and industries still experience challenges. The War on Terror. In the 1990s, the United States began to experience acts of terrorism. Terrorism is the threat or use of violence against civilians to intimidate or cause fear for political or social reasons. Some terrorists have been from foreign countries, whereas others have been U.S. citizens. On September 11, 2001, the United States suffered the deadliest terrorist attack in the country's history when 19 terrorists hijacked four American jets. They crashed two into the World Trade Center in New York City and one into the Pentagon. In response, President George W. Bush declared a war on terrorism. He sent military forces to Afghanistan to kill or capture members of a terrorist group called Al Qaeda, which had planned the 9/11 attacks. Troops from other allied countries joined the U.S. forces there. President Bush also viewed Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein as a serious threat to Americans. In 2003, Bush sent U.S. troops into Iraq to remove Hussein from power. President Obama took over the U.S. war on terror in 2009. U.S. forces killed Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks in 2011. However, since then, other terrorist groups, such as the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, and individuals influenced by ISIS have become a threat. Today, world leaders continue to work with the United States to combat terrorism. In the United States, the Department of Homeland Security was established to prevent terror attacks on American soil. This federal government oversees many organizations, including the U.S. Coast Guard, the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. Many other countries have also increased security with their borders, especially at airports. Government. In 2008, Barack Obama won the presidential election, becoming the nation's first African American president. President Obama passed health care reform legislation and oversaw the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq. Slow economic growth, unemployment, and high federal deficits were major issues during Obama's successful bid to win a second term in 2012. During his second term, Obama tackled a variety of issues, including high unemployment and terrorism. The national unemployment rate steadily declined from a high of 9.6% following the Great Recession to 4.8% when he left office. Obama also signed the Paris Agreement to combat climate change. Along with the United Kingdom, France, China, Russia, and Germany, President Obama made a deal with Iran to limit the Middle Eastern country's nuclear program. The goal of the deal was to prevent Iran from creating nuclear bombs. He also reestablished relations with Cuba. After Cuba became a communist dictatorship in 1959, the United States stopped having diplomatic relations with the country. Beginning in 2014, President Obama allowed more travel to and trade with Cuba. He also reopened the U.S. Embassy in Cuba's capital, Havana. During the 2016 election, Donald Trump, a business leader, was the Republican Party candidate. He defeated the Democratic Party candidate Hillary Clinton, a former First Lady, Senator, and Secretary of State. As in other recent elections, the economy and terrorism were two issues that concerned voters. Some voters were concerned about the negative impacts of free trade with other countries, such as the decline of manufacturing jobs in the United States. Issues of cultural conflict within the United States were also discussed during the election. These issues included the role racism plays in society and who should be allowed to immigrate to the United States. The candidates and their supporters also differed in how they thought religious values should be reflected in government and laws. During his first 2 years in office, President Trump worked with the Republican controlled Congress to implement his agenda. He appointed conservative judges to the federal judiciary, including 2 justices to the Supreme Court. Trump also removed the United States from the Paris Agreement, negotiated a new trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and signed a sweeping tax reform law. Because of his business background, many of Trump's policies were designed to foster economic growth, create new jobs, and increase U.S. trade. Many of Trump's policy reversed those of the previous administration. For example, Trump's chilled diplomatic relations with Cuba, pulled out of a deal with Iran, and attempted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. President Trump also held summit meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin and the North Korean ruler Kim Jong-un in an attempt to build better relationships with some Americans' foreign adversaries. During their presidencies, both Obama and Trump faced challenges caused by increased political partisanship in the United States. Each faced gridlock and opposition from Congress, which was often controlled by the other party. The opposing party challenged and blocked many of each president's policies and appointments. Congress also used its powers of oversight to investigate the executive branch, and the Justice Department conducted a 2-year investigation into Trump's campaign and administration. As a result, both presidents found it difficult to implement their plans for the country. In summary, in this lesson, you learned about the features, resources, and economies of the regions of the United States. You also learned that the economy and terrorism are major issues facing the country today.